have redone the artwork over my computer. I put the literary ladies back here. I did really love having my Lord of the Rings art, and I moved them to that wall, but I don't know if I really like them there. I might end up just putting them away for a little while. But these, I think, were by Idlewild. I had a literary ladies calendar one year. And so, of course, I saved the art and put it back up. I thought it might be fun to do a sort of project where I try to read a book by every single one of the authors this year. That could be fun. I did find my copy of Little House in the Big Woods, so I've already fulfilled the Laura Ingalls Wilder prompt. I'm sure I will be reading Jane Austen at some point. I have been wanting to reread Little Women. Ellen Montgomery is another author that I feel like I just end up reading every year, something by her. And see, I'm already thinking of changing my February to CTBR, and February has not even begun. But Mary Shelley, Frankenstein's the only thing by her that I've ever read. So it could be fun to read something else. She did do a sort of travel journal that has letters in it, so maybe I will do her instead of Lord Byron for the nonfiction prompt. But yes, there's the new wall of authoresses. Very inspiring to look at while I work on my second book, which I'm hoping to put out before the end of the winter. This little calancho was so lovely with its delicate pink flowers, and it wasn't even that expensive. I let myself pick it up. I think I might read some more of this before bed. It's just such a gentle, lovely story, although of course there are some quotations that I want to share. I feel like I should probably read it with a pen in hand, because then I can just make a little mark. Here was one passage I loved. She was a sensible child, and knew that in this life you must tend to the people who are near at hand and want you, and not to those who have disappeared round the corner and don't. It was Job's birthday, and he had not had his primroses yet. The book opens at the beginning of spring on this beautiful spring day, and it takes place in the shipyards, which I feel like we hear a little bit of these about, is it called The Hard? In the Eliot Desmaroches trilogy. But this takes place, actually, I think either right before or during the Regency period, during the Napoleonic Wars, when they were very busily building ships like mad, and so it takes place in the shipbuilders' town, and I love how we hear about every street had its own sort of craftsman, and it was named after those craftsmen. Tabitha, the little girl, is the main character, and she's so sweet. There's this ship out in the harbor that has been started on. They've started to build it, but it's incomplete, and the people who ordered it aren't going to be able to pay for it, so they're going to scrap it. But Tabitha feels the ship come alive beneath her and is determined to figure out a way to get the ship built, and she's dragging Job, an old shipbuilder, along with her to try to figure it out. "Do you believe in angels, Job?" asked Tabitha. "Up in heaven, blowing trumpets," said Job. "Not down here keeping shop." Tabitha was silent, thinking, why must people always think of heaven as being up in the sky? Why should it be there more than anywhere else? The sky wasn't any more heavenly than the earth in springtime. Why shouldn't heaven be within half a mile of them? And why shouldn't the angels keep shop if they wanted to? It must be very dull to blow trumpets all the time. Keeping shop would make a little variety for them. She looked up at Job with a brilliant smile. "We won't be unhappy yet," she said to him. "We'll wait till tomorrow. Something may happen tomorrow." And then I love this, when she is going home to dinner, she asks her father, "Father, where's heaven?" asked Tabitha. "Wherever your mother and onions meet together," said Simon. "That's what I thought," said Tabitha with satisfaction. "I knew it wasn't just up in the sky. It's my belief it's everywhere." Yes, very much enjoying this so far. This is a Girls Gone By paperback edition.
I bought a Christmas present for my mom this year that I had to borrow as soon as possible because it sounded so delightful. So I've talked about the author Beverly Nichols and his wonderful gardening books. It turns out he wrote a book about cats, and it's called Cats ABC. I picked it up on Thrift Books, and it is just what it sounds like, a delightful and whimsical alphabet of musings about cats. Beverly Nichols tells us about his own 3 cats and his history with cats, and he has such a great voice. There's so much charm and coziness, but also humor. He's definitely got a little bit of a bite to him, and he writes so beautifully and evocatively. I have a couple quotations here I thought I'd read to you while we sit here with the beautiful Cymbeline. Cats are the most elegant of all God's creatures. As soon as a cat walks into a modern room, the whole vulgar collection of streamlined bits and pieces looks even more gauche and shoddy than before. Cats were created to recline on chairs by Chippendale, or perhaps one should say that chairs by Chippendale were created for cats to recline on. Their milk should be poured from jugs of Queen Anne silver, and when they walk into the garden, they should do so, whenever possible, via a long and lofty Palladian colonnade, with a footman in attendance. If only I could provide priceless antiques for Cymbeline. She'll have to be content with her gnome house. Here's another one. They are wild creatures at heart, and as the darkness falls, they hear the call of the jungle. True, the jungle may be only a backyard, and the tropical undergrowth may be confined to a speckled laurel and a cluster of bedraggled ivy, but at least it is in the open air, under the stars, and the night wind is tingling with 1,000 mysterious scents, and the wall can be left upon and stalked along and transformed into a magic thoroughfare. To keep a cat indoors with nothing to do but stare at this dark paradise through a pane of glass and lash its tail impotently against the net curtains seems to me grossly inconsiderate. If I myself had been a cat in the days of the Regency, and I have sober reasons for believing this to have been the case, I should have described it as the outside of enough. Why does Beverly Nichols think he was a cat in the Regency? Cymbeline has a really great schedule where she is inside for her naps and then goes outside. We call it her nighttime wilds. She always gets a lot of extra energy and really seems to enjoy her outdoor rambles, and then comes back before it gets too late. But Beverly Nichols is very in favor of cat doors, and his description makes me wish I could install one. The gentle sound of the doors swinging backwards and forwards at all times of the day and night is a pleasing accompaniment to my life. It reminds me that the cats are alert and fully occupied and intent upon their many tasks of inspection, espionage, and sentry work. Beverly Nichols notes in his book that apparently he would put out cat calendars every year, which I looked on eBay and I couldn't find one, but that sounds pretty awesome. And there is actually a Cats XYZ, so he wrote a second one, which I'm going to have to find. Well, friends, I thought I would sit down with a little pile of what I've been reading in January and give you some quick bookish updates. I'm almost through with The Hobbit. I should have it finished before the book club. It's so fun to see how Bilbo becomes more and more confident, because he has these sort of hobbitish instincts that just constantly make him wish he was back at home with the tea kettle on and bacon and eggs and toast, But then he also has his Tookish ancestors like Belladonna Took and others urging him on to adventure and even helping him enjoy the adventures and scary scenarios that he finds himself in. Although hobbits love home best, they are very well equipped for adventures such as this. Having made up his mind, he crept along as cleverly as he could. Hobbits are clever at quietness, especially in woods, as I have already told you. Of course, there's the iconic scene where he meets Gollum, and they have a battle of wits with riddles, and it made me realize I would lose a battle of riddles. I don't know nearly enough riddles. It makes me want to memorize some. An eye in a blue face saw an eye in a green face. That eye is like to this eye, said the first eye, but in low place, not in high place. The answer, as Gollum knows, is some on the daisies. Yeah, their riddles are very impressive, though, and I love how Bilbo has that moment of pity where he could have killed Gollum. No, not a fair fight. He was invisible now. Gollum had no sword. Gollum had not actually threatened to kill him or tried to yet, and he was miserable, alone, lost. A sudden understanding, a pity mixed with horror, welled up in Bilbo's heart, a glimpse of endless unmarked days without light or hope of betterment, hard stone, cold fish, sneaking and whispering. All these thoughts
All these thoughts passed in a flash of a second. Bilbo recognizes that, but for the grace of God, there go I. Gollum was once not unlike him, so he manages to leap over Gollum, of course, and escape. There's so many beautiful images in The Hobbit, like the bears dancing when they visit Bjorn, which they actually don't get to see, but they can see the footprints outside the next morning, and when they are crossing through Mirkwood, and Bilbo goes up the tree. And first of all, they've been in the shadowy forest for so long that just the daylight and the blue sky are blinding and magnificent. But then there are all these butterflies all around him living on the treetops, and it's just such a gorgeous image. This book is just such a fun mix of adventure and coziness, and so fun to revisit. And then I did also finish Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. This is a translation by Tolkien. The original text was written in medieval times by an unknown author from the Midlands. So he wasn't from London, like, say, Chaucer. And so he writes with a very different voice, which Tolkien tells us about. Part of the fun of reading this was it felt like I was sitting in on one of Tolkien's Anglo-Saxon classes at Oxford, because he does give a little bit of background in the introduction. Tolkien talks about how this manuscript came to light and how probably in medieval times this author was fairly well known. It is a solemn thought that his name is now forgotten, a reminder of the great gaps of ignorance over which we now weave the thin webs of our literary history. But in the end, he says, let us be grateful for what we have got, preserved by chary chance. Another window of many-colored glass looking back into the Middle Ages and giving us another view. Chaucer was a great poet, and by the power of his poetry, he tends to dominate the view of his time taken by readers of literature. But his was not the only mood or temper of mind in those days. There were others, such as this author, who, while he may have lacked Chaucer's subtlety and flexibility, had, what shall we say, a nobility to which Chaucer scarcely reached. The nobility, I think, is closely tied to the author's faith, because in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, the Christian faith is very important to the story. And in the introduction, he talks about how it's kind of like a reconciling of these chivalric ideals of courtesy and the Christian morals. Because Sir Gawain has to undergo some temptation and some challenges. The story opens appropriately at a New Year's Eve feast in Camelot. Arthur is there. I liked this one description. So this is Arthur's feelings before a feast. He doesn't like to sit down until everybody else is eating. Arthur obviously has kind of a lot of energy. It pleased him not to eat upon festival so fair, ere he first was apprised of some strange story or stirring adventure, or some moving marvel that he might believe in, of noble men, knighthood, or new adventures. Or a challenger should come, a champion seeking to join with him in jousting, in jeopardy to set his life against life, each allowing the other the favor of fortune, were she fairer to him. This was the king's custom wherever his court was holden, at each famous feast among his fair company in hall. So his face doth proud appear, and he stands up stout and tall, all young in the new year, much mirth he makes withal. Arthur gets his wish because the Green Knight comes riding into the hall and offers quite a challenge. And Sir Gawain is the only one to take it out. I thought this was just really interesting. And it does make me want to read the other two, which are supposed to be by the same author. So we'll see if I have time to get to that a little later. I did borrow this book from my brother Porthos. It was in his knowledge cube. Over Christmas, we filmed a sort of bookshelf tour. His books are in storage in these knowledge cubes. So we unboxed one of them, and it was really fun to film, but there were a ton of books, and I did try to do like B-roll where I did close-ups of each book as we went through, and I know from experience of editing other bookshelf tours that just takes a very long time to piece together. So I'm thinking I might save that video to edit later in the year, just because I have Regency, also the book of Cymbeline, the second book I'm trying to finish up. So I'm sorry, Porthos, if you're watching. I can't wait to get that video up, and it will be up, but just maybe not for a little bit. So the glimpses of Porthos's collection that you can see now are the books that he very graciously let me borrow, including Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And this one just seemed very appropriate for President's Day. It is Maxims of Washington. The introduction was talking about how all of the founding fathers left behind a tremendous amount of written material, which, you know, if you've seen the Hamilton musical, you think of Hamilton writing like he's running out of time. But I didn't think about how the other founding fathers also had a ton of letters and just lots of collected writings. In this volume, you have maxims, so little snippets kind of categorized by subject, and I feel like I would rather know the context. And they're so short sometimes. It's just like a fragment of a sentence that the author put in here that I feel like I should go and find an actual collection of Washington's letters where I can read the whole letter and maybe have some notes to go with it to explain the context. But it is so tantalizing here that you have letters, you know, to Rochambeau, to Lafayette, to Hamilton, of course. Here's one snippet he wrote to Hamilton. I hope I shall always possess firmness and virtue enough to maintain what I consider the most enviable of all titles, the character of an honest man. Without virtue and without integrity, the finest talents of the most brilliant accomplishments can never gain the respect or conciliate the esteem of the truly valuable part of mankind. Against the malignancy of the discontented, the turbulent, and the vicious, no abilities, no exertions, nor the most unshaken integrity are any safeguard. Lots of very interesting sentiments and observations, and this is a really beautiful volume that Porthos picked up. So it's fun to get a little taste of it with President's Day coming up, but I think I'm going to have to do some research and find another volume, more complete volume of Washington's writings and letters. I did manage to unearth a copy of Little House in the Big Woods by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I'm so glad I got to reread this in winter because I just think it's the perfect season. It does technically cover the whole year, but so many of the scenes and chapters are in winter. I think Laura must have had so many evocative memories and that she shares with you in these wonderful, wonderful scenes. This was one of my favorite series growing up. It has such beautiful illustrations. I mean, just on the cover there, it's Garth Williams is the illustrator. And the illustrations really add so much to it. It's wonderful to see the thrift and industry of the Ingalls family, the way they make everything for themselves, and they're, on the whole, so content with what they have. I love how Laura and Mary make a sort of little dollhouse for themselves upstairs in the attic, and they have, you know, all of their food for the winter is stored there. So it's like they're using the gourds as chairs and tables, and you have all the wonderful stories that Pa used to tell Laura and Mary. There's a dance at Grandpa's, which is so fun to read about, and the sugar snow, the making of the maple syrup. If you enjoy like slow living videos on YouTube or, you know, like homesteading, self-sufficiency, that kind of thing, you should definitely revisit or visit for the first time on the Laura Ingalls Wilder series. I am thinking I'll continue rereading it because it's been a little while. A couple of you guys have messaged me to say you're starting early on Feb Regency, which I absolutely love. I have been doing too. I have already started my audiobook of The Absentee by Mariah Edgeworth, and I'm just enjoying it so much. Last year I read Castle Rackrent, which was good, but it's all told in like this dialect of the Irish steward. So it's not really Mariah Edgeworth's own voice, but her own voice is here in The Absentee. I guess I will save my observations on The Absentee for when Feb Regency has actually properly begun. But I'm very excited for the Regency reading that I have lined up next month.